In the theater of modern warfare, red lines are often drawn in the sand only to be washed away by the reality of combat. But on the night of May 13, 2026, the Kremlin crossed a line that fundamentally altered the geometric calculus of the war in Ukraine. Russia unleashed one of the most devastating synchronized air campaigns of the conflict. Over a 48-hour window, the Russian aerospace forces launched more than 1,000 loitering munitions and dozens of advanced cruise missiles. The primary vector of attack targeted Kyiv, but the shockwaves felt from Dnipro to Odessa-Kharkiv to Zaporizhzhia. However, this wasn't a strike aimed at hardening military infrastructure. The targets were deeply civilian residential high-rises, critical thermal power plants, and strategic railway nodes. In Kyiv, a single Kh-101 cruise missile manufactured shockingly in the second quarter of 2026, despite Western sanctions, pulverized an apartment complex claiming 21 civilian lives. President Volodymyr Zelensky's response was immediate, calculated, and devoid of diplomatic ambiguity. He vowed a retaliation that the Russian high command could neither predict nor contain. But this wouldn't be a simple eye-for-an-eye strike. It was the unveiling of a highly sophisticated multi-domain asymmetric doctrine designed to bring the structural cost of the war directly to Vladimir Putin's doorstep. To understand the military brilliance of Ukraine's counteroffensive, we must look at the target that the Kremlin deemed mathematically untouchable: Moscow. For over 2 years, Putin operated under a domestic narrative that the capital was insulated from the horrors of the front line. Moscow was shielded by what Western analysts considered the most dense integrated air defense network on Earth. According to Brigadier General Robert Brovdy, commander of Ukraine's unmanned systems forces, the capital's defensive umbrella comprised over 100 strategic S-300, S-400, and the newly deployed S-500 Prometheus missile launchers. These heavy systems were layered with more than 50 Panzer S-1 and S-2 short-range point defense units. Theoretically, this network could track and engage over 700 inbound targets simultaneously. Yet, on the night of May 16th, Ukraine exposed the inherent vulnerabilities of Soviet legacy air defense doctrines. Ukraine launched an armada of approximately 600 domestically produced long-range fixed-wing strike drones. This wasn't a random swarm, it was a highly coordinated saturation attack spreading across 14 Russian oblasts. As the drones penetrated Moscow's outer rings, the psychological impact mirrored the tactical disruption. Explosions rocked the elite suburbs of Khimki and Mytishchi, major international aviation hubs including Sheremetyevo and Domodedovo ground to an immediate halt. Crucially, several drones detonated within a 20-kilometer radius of Novo-Ogaryovo, Putin's primary fortified residence. The military message to the Russian general staff was unmistakable: if your multi-billion-dollar air defense network cannot protect the capital, it cannot protect the state. While the strikes on Moscow achieved massive psychological paralysis, the true kinetic objective of Ukraine's campaign was the systemic destruction of Russia's downstream oil refining infrastructure. In military logistics, fuel is the lifeblood of maneuver warfare. Without diesel, a T-90M tank is merely a stationary multi-million-dollar bunker. Ukraine's targets were chosen with surgical precision, utilizing a concept known as logistical decapitation. First was the Moscow oil refinery, located just 17 kilometers from the Kremlin. It was struck and completely neutralized, but the heaviest operational blow occurred further east at the Ryazan refinery. Ryazan is no ordinary industrial site. It processes over 17 million tons of crude oil annually, accounting for roughly 5% of Russia's total refining capacity. More importantly, Ryazan is a primary logistical hub, supplying high-grade diesel and jet fuel directly to the Russian Western group of forces operating in Ukraine. Simultaneously, Ukrainian long-range drones pushed 800 kilometers deep into Russian territory to strike Lukoil's flagship Kestovo refinery, in the Nizhny Novgorod region. For 2 consecutive days, Ukrainian drones bypassed local electronic warfare arrays to score direct hits on the primary atmospheric crude distillation units, the most complex and difficult to replace components of any refinery. By the end of May, the numbers spoke of a logistical catastrophe for the Kremlin. Out of Russia's 10 largest refining complexes, 6 were either completely offline or severely crippled. Russia's total domestic refining capacity plummeted by an estimated 10%. The Russian Ministry of Defense scrambled to control the narrative, claiming a 95% interception rate and accusing Ukraine of targeting civilians. However, open-source intelligence and geolocated footage uploaded by Russian citizens told a damning story. In multiple instances, frantic Pantsir S one-point defense missiles misfired or tracked incorrectly, slamming directly into civilian apartment blocks in the Moscow suburbs, proving that the frantic defenders were completely overwhelmed by the velocity and scale of the Ukrainian influx. What allowed Ukraine to execute such a deep, sustained campaign? The answer lies in a newly formulated operational concept called the Middle Strike Doctrine. While the world focuses on long-range strategic drones or short-range FPVs, Ukraine has masterfully weaponized the medium-range envelope, utilizing fixed-wing autonomous aircraft with an operational radius between 50 and 200 kilometers. These drones are equipped with AI-driven terrain mapping guidance systems, making them entirely immune to traditional Russian GPS jamming and electronic warfare protocols. Over the past 4 months, this middle strike campaign systematically dismantled Russia's tactical air defense backbone along the occupied territories. In April alone, Ukraine eliminated over 250 Russian air defense units, including highly prized Tor and Buk missile systems. This created a classic tactical domino effect. As the frontline air defense crumbled, it opened up clean corridors for strategic deep strike drones to fly unhindered toward Moscow and the interior refineries. At the same time, this air superiority translated directly to fire control over Russian logistics corridors on the front lines. On the critical Donetsk Ring Road and the highways connecting Mariupol and Starobesheve, Ukrainian reconnaissance drones now maintain 24-hour persistent surveillance. The Ukrainian military has turned these vital supply lines into death corridors. FPV kamikaze drones are deployed in pre-programmed ambush modes, resting silently in bushes or on structures until an asset such as a fuel tanker or a heavy ammunition transport is detected. Within seconds, the drone reactivates, takes off, and eliminates the target. This total interdiction of supplies has caused the Russian summer offensive to completely stall. Artillery intensity has dropped significantly due to the destruction of forward ammunition dumps, and frontline units are facing acute fuel rationing. But the operational unraveling of the Russian state isn't just happening from the air, it is bleeding from within. As the regular Ukrainian armed forces pressure the perimeter, internal partisan networks are fracturing Russia's internal security. An underground sabotage group known as Black Spark successfully targeted the crown jewel of Russian logistics, the Trans-Siberian Railway. In a daring operation at the Voinovka station in Tyumen, a critical artery for Western Siberia's energy exports, partisans destroyed a heavy diesel locomotive transporting thousands of tons of military-grade fuel. Days later, they struck again at the Sverdlovsk sorting station in Yekaterinburg, causing over 200 million rubles in structural damage. Despite massive FSB surveillance and armed patrols, the operatives vanished without a trace. Concurrently, the Freedom of Russia Legion sabotaged vital rail switches in the coal-rich Kemerovo region, while Crimean partisans severed a critical section of the 359-kilometer Kuban-Crimea gas pipeline, cutting off the natural gas supply to occupying forces on the peninsula. From the Black Sea coast, where 5 Russian Caspian Fleet vessels were structurally damaged by maritime drones, to the heart of Siberia, the the Russian state is finding itself structurally incapable of defending its own territory. Vladimir Putin's domestic legitimacy has always rested on a singular, unwritten contract with the Russian populace stability in exchange for absolute authority. Today, that contract is in tatters when a regime cannot protect its capital, cannot secure its energy grid, and forces its own citizens into air raid shelters while canceling main battle tank displays at the Victory Day parade. Its aura of invincibility evaporates. Ukraine has successfully flipped the script of this war. By employing a brilliant blend of engineering ingenuity, AI-guided technology, and relentless asymmetric pressure, Kyiv has proven that in modern warfare, mass can be defeated by velocity, and a giant can be brought down by severing its heels. The Russian war is no longer a distant television broadcast for the citizens of Moscow. It is a reality that never sleeps. What are your thoughts on Ukraine's middle strike strategy? Can Russia rebuild its broken logistical lines, or is the Kremlin running out of time and armor? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more comprehensive military analyses. Until next time, this is Warfront Logic style analysis. Stay sharp.